But something you touched on before, the removal of inappropriate content, right? What was the word they used? Not inappropriate. What was the word you said? Offensive?
I
offensive content?
may have said offensive or whatever. But
this is scary.
Two things that I am immediately like, oh no. Those Dudley Boys matches in ECW.
The promos.
The promos, which were kept on the network, by the way, and they're very dirty.
And words we don't hear anymore.
Exactly. And a lot of late 90s Shawn Michaels stuff, I feel like, is going to be eliminated completely. Possibly a lot of Attitude Era stuff, that was just like borderline, like choppy, pee.
So here's where I stand on this. I'm totally against censorship. Okay?
Right.
Totally against it. You have an option as a service provider and as a viewer. Service provider, you have the option of adding a parental control button where you can now hide content that may be considered offensive. You have parental controls that you could put in place. I'm not saying I enjoy hearing racist or terrible, heinous terms. However, I do think it's very dangerous when you start editorializing this type of content. Because when you use the word offensive, that line budges and it moves. We know what the rules are for over-the-air programming, right? We know that cable, even though you are allowed, because it's a premium channel, to do whatever you want, to say whatever you want, we know that cable adheres to advertisers, and they have their own set guidance. We've had this guidance in place since the conception of cable television. Now you're telling us that things that cable TV have aired, you are now telling us that you find it offensive. And it doesn't fit your community guideline or your company guideline. I think this is very dangerous. And again, it's not there to protect. I'm not there to protect a wrestler calling another person the F word, right? It's not about that. It's about how far does the line go, right? Where do you start cutting things off? Because once you don't have a definition and you just label things offensive, that line pivots. They've removed WrestleMania, what was it? WrestleMania 6 was not on there. The Piper thing where he painted half his face black, right?
Oh boy.
That's off. But you know what you're not remembering? Mattel put out a commemorative version of that.
That's right. Yeah.
So where was, you know what I mean? Like, these are things that we need to be very careful about. And again, I am not protecting hate speech. I'm not telling you that you shouldn't be offended. What I'm telling you is it's your right to be offended, but it's also out there, and we need to also remember that these are things that happened, and these are conversations that happened. But by eliminating these, and it's not just about wrestling, right? Books, any kind of literature, any kind of television. When you start erasing these things, you forget the time that it happened. The Jeffersons would never be able to air today. All in the Family would never be able to air today. But should they be removed in the eco space of content? No, I don't think so. I don't think removal of content should be a thing that we ever talk about. I think it's very, very dangerous.
Could I jump in?
Yeah,
with my own whimsical theory about this, which I've said for many years?
Yes, please.
Self-censorship. I'm a fan of self-censorship.
So am I. I'm fine with that.
I know myself. I know I'm not going to watch. This is just an example. I'm going to cast a wide net here. I know I'm not going to watch like racially infused stuff,
Yes.
That's just me. Right. And a lot of other people, I self-censor that. I'm not going to say, yo, man, this shouldn't be on TV. Some kid's going to watch it. Guess what? It's your job to make sure your kid doesn't watch it. The other thing that goes along with that is this kind of, the bigger issue here is, it's twofold. The bigger issue here is, one, it's almost like self-censorship is taken out of the picture. And I know it's wrestling, but that leads to a bigger issue where it's like, no, please, corporate America, tell me what is censored and what is not so I can live my life, which is very bizarre. It's like that weird, like, brother's keeper thing on social media where everybody's telling on each other. The other thing is, there is an argument that says wrestling got away with all this stuff for how many years because people look at it and go, it's just wrestling, right?
Okay.
And now that it's part of NBC on the Peacock thing, it's like, well, we have to be more concerned about what is being said and what isn't, because that's how we run our business. So it's very bizarre if you think about it. You know,
Listen,
that's just me.
I think we need to remember these things happened, and I don't think anybody is watching. Here's a great example, right? And here's where it gets a little dangerous. Bachelor 3000 brought up a great point. They got rid of the segment where Vince called Cena the N-word with an A. Okay, we're gonna let's talk about it. They removed it. Do you know? I saw 2 articles about this. Online. I saw 2 articles. You know what they said in the article? Peacock removes segment where Vince McMahon calls Booker T the N-word. That was the actual headline. And I go, you know what? They never watched it. They never saw this. That's not what happened. Not that it was acceptable by today's standards, or even back then when it was done. I don't think it was a cheap pop. It was weird. It was uncomfortable. But regardless, should it be removed? My answer is no. I don't think it should be removed. I don't think any content like that should be erased from history. We should reflect back and say, you know what? We sucked. You know, you're going to remove the Bubba Ray Dudley promo at Heatwave or whatever the pay-per-view that was, where he calls the guy in the Hawaiian shirt, a very derogatory term, or refers to teaching a sexual act to the daughter, the 14-year-old daughter in the crowd. I mean, listen, there's an argument for it for sure, but I fall under, I don't think we should allow a corporation to determine based on their guidelines what we should hear. I don't like that. I agree with that. And it's their content. They can do whatever they want. But I also have the opinion of, I'm not a fan of censorship in that matter. I think we should, again, self-censorship, reflection of what you want to say, what you don't want to say. That's a whole separate scenario. Your guidelines in life, very different.
There's also the argument that it's performance art, right? You know, which is a huge thing.
Well, that's where it gets dangerous. You hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, it's very dangerous too. And let's use Bubba Ray as an example, right? Like those very incendiary.
I don't want to use Bubba as an example. I don't want to use him.
All right, okay. But I'm just saying, like those ECW promos where he's calling people out in the crowd. He's a character, right? He's there to drive people crazy and make them hate him, right? He's doing a job. He's paid to be a character. He's paid to do that gimmick, right? Just like an actor on a TV show. If it was the guy doing that, that's a different story.
Very different story.
Of course, all that stuff should be removed. Yeah. But also the logic is, if they're removing this stuff from the WWE Network, what's to stop Netflix from removing, let's say, a movie like Django Unchained or like Hateful Eight, which are very, very gnarly in their language.
Let's take it even more. Let's take it even further. American History X. Right?
Okay, there you go.
By the way, a movie that I cannot watch.
Very tough to watch, yeah.
It is very difficult to watch. It was difficult to watch when I watched it when it came out, and I can't watch it. But I do recognize that it's a very powerful film. That movie, that's an extreme, but at what point does film and cinema now start getting erased? And should it? I don't think so.
Again, bigger issue. They just recently removed a lot of Dr. Seuss stuff because of like the time it was written in and the beliefs that people had at the time, stricken from history. It's a very fascinating argument. And I feel like in American culture in the last 100 years, we go up and down with censorship. Lenny Bruce in the 50s, wasn't he blackballed and fined an exorbitant amount of money for dropping the F-bomb on stage?
Yeah. Lenny Bruce was arrested, I believe. Right. Steve Allen too, I believe. Steve Allen at one point too was getting in a lot of trouble.
And then you went into the free love era of the 60s and 70s and the debaucherous hedonistic 80s, and then that became like the 90s babies. And I feel like those decades you just had like more extreme to the birth of daytime television, which is completely raucous. I feel like anybody who is not, it's a generational thing. Like you and I remember like Morton Downey Jr.
Oh yeah,
and Richard Bay and like the early days of Springer, where like that stuff was
bonkers,
completely trash and nasty, and it was the product of like the decades, you know. And now in the 20 teens into the early 2020s, you know, censorship is back in a big way, and with certain things, absolutely, it's fine, you know, great, but to take away self-censorship, I think, is a big issue.
Yeah, I think so. And with that said,
yeah,
I hope you guys, you know, we didn't bore you with this, but I think it's an important thing to talk about. And you know, I truly believe that most people are on the side of we don't need censorship. We don't need you to protect our delicate ears. We are smart enough to determine what we want to listen to and what we find offensive and what should be deemed offensive. I think majority of people are in that corner. I think a lot of people don't want to vocalize that. And we'll see what happens. I mean, we may have a turnaround here where people are like, guys, enough of this. You know, you're going after Dr. Seuss. You know, your standards are very different today than they were 50 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. You can't look at history with today's eyes. You have to reflect back and recognize, like, man, people were really crappy. Even the good people were crappy. That's just how it is. And people will look back to us. Listen, same thing. They're going to, you know, in 40 years, dude, somebody's going to find the show. And somebody's going to say, man, you know what? These guys were good, but their takes on this is not appropriate. It happens. That's just how it is. Hey, guys, thanks for checking out Mattman Clips. If you want to listen to a full episode of the show, click on one of the links below and be sure to subscribe to us here on YouTube and, of course, everywhere podcasts are available.